it's story time. Now, okay, we're going to tell a story about how this deer tried to kill a blue tick that I used to own. Now, there's going to be some adult themes in this video, so if you can't handle that, if you got your little kids with you, Pop and Granny, if you're watching, you might want to turn this one away. I don't know. But either way, we'll just jump into it. Now, I was out coon hunting one night. I'll be honest with you, I was coon hunting. You know, heck, I can't prove I done it. Y'all can't prove I done it. So we're just sharing a story. So I was out coon hunting one night, and it was just one of those crappy little nights. Like, we went all the way up down this one point, just me and the dog. I was by myself. Went all the way up this one side of a point, and it kept running like coons and possums across the field and run them to the river. But it couldn't jump off the riverbank and continue to run them. So, you know, that's kind of where all the races ended, was over on the river. So we went all the way down, finishing races on the river. And I thought, well, on the way back, I'll just jump down on the riverside, you know, get off the bank and get down on the exposed river bottom. The river was kind of low. I figured I would get down there and hunt my way back, thinking most of the game had been pushed that way. Well, I start hunting back up through that way, and hadn't got on another kind of a boring night, and there's probably 20 foot of exposed river bottom, you know. And I'm just hunting down through there, and all of a sudden, there's a tree that had fell off the actual bank, and when it fell down like this, you know, the little root ball was sticking up, and between the root ball and the actual bank, it was about a 2.5 foot gap. Well, it was a good full moon night, and I hadn't had my light cut on at all. I'd literally been walking around with the dog pretty much all night, maybe cut on my light once, twice, shine trees. I mean, it was a super bright night. I don't know why I decided to cut my light on. I didn't hear nothing. I didn't sense nothing. The dog didn't give anything away. There was literally no reason for me to cut my light on, but I did. And I shined up between that 2.5 foot gap between the root ball and the bank, and there was these big old set of eyes looking at me, and I was like, holy crap, you know? And I'm sitting there, I mean, it's like 15 yards from me. I'm like, what in the world? And either way, I get to noticing my eyes are kind of doing this. I'm like, well, that's a deer. Like, what in the world's that deer doing just standing there? Surely it here just walking up on it, you know? And finally it turned its head sideways, and when it did, I seen all them horns up there. I was like, daggone, it's a nice buck. I'm like, still, what is he doing down here? Well, while I'm thinking all this in my head, the blue tick ain't got a clue what's going on, and she's just still walking along, walking towards that buck, and I'm not paying her much mind. And the buck, I got that light shining right in his face, so he's blinded, and he can't see that dog walking towards him. Well, finally, when that dog clears the light and he sees that dog just a few feet from him, ears go back and them horns go down. And I mean, I usually train some pretty rough dogs, so I mean, you can just imagine how rough this got. So he reared his head down to go get that dog, and the dog looked at him and went and was running away from him and jumped over the log and just bawling and squalling. It was pretty funny. Well, anyways, and by that time I was like, hey, what's wrong with you? You know, and I shot into the root ball trying to spook him, you know, right over his head. And when I did, the buck stopped, and he's just looking around like, what in the world was that? He didn't know how to register the shot. And I'm sitting there thinking, what is wrong with this thing? Well, about that time, the deer hears the dog on the other side of the log, and he's going to try to go over and get it, so he runs back around, runs behind the root ball, and he slips and falls. And that didn't have no significance at the time, but it had the significance later, once y'all hear the story. So he fell, and he got up, and he looked back to his left, behind the root ball over there. The ears went back, he went behind the root ball, and out come the dog from the other side, just bawling and squalling, and run that dog out into the river this time. And I was like, that's enough of that. I was like, that is enough of that. So I just had no 22 mag at the time, and I just raised up, boom, shot him right in the very top of the neck, right there behind the head, boom, and he just belly flopped, never kicked, never done nothing. Now, most people shoot a big buck, and they're like, woo, I got a big buck, with these big horns, and I wasn't happy. Let's put it that way. I was mad. I bet you could have heard me cussing up and down the river a mile or two. It's just, oof. I'm not going to repeat that part of it. That's a little too rough. But anyways, I was mad, and I got a hold of a buddy to help me come get him out of there. And I noticed I was having trouble telling what age he was. I see deer all the time. I've seen thousands of deer in my life, up close and personal. I'm a processor, you know. So I had a trouble judging his age, and I couldn't figure out, well, you know, he had like the skeletal structure of like a 3.5-year-old plus, but he wasn't filled out right. Well, when we got him on back to the processing, I finally figured out what was wrong with him. He'd already been shot. Now, this is where the story gets graphic. If y'all don't want to hear this, click away or skip forward or something, but this is where it gets bad. Now, he'd already been shot. Now, there's a piece of skin that connects most four-legged animals. It connects their leg, their thigh region, to their stomach, and that's called a flank. And the bullet had went in the flank on one side and came out the flank on the other. So he had 2 holes right there already. It hit him right in the head of his penis. Yeah, it looked bad. It looked like an infected flyer. It was bad. It was green and yellow and just stuff. Anyways, and then it continued traveling. You could see on the right side of his scrotum where some of the hair had been knocked off. And you could tell where it glanced his right testicle in the process. And his right testicle was about half the size of his left, and it was hard as a rock. It was literally deteriorating back into his body. Y'all ever been flicked in the testicle? You ever been flicked with a 30-06? Ugh, I just hate to imagine what kind of pain this creature was going through in them final days. But either way, then the shot started getting bad, because it went in the front of his thigh on the opposite side. The entrance hole was that big, and then when it come out on the back of his thigh, the exit hole was about that big, and it was oval shaped for whatever reason. Because like I said, it already mushroomed from hitting all this other stuff. Ugh. But anyway, you could see a hole through his leg that big around through all this big, massive rot-away areas. And he was poor. He had no fat on him. His muscles were so bad, like his you could see all his ribs, and his backbone was sticking up probably that high above his tenderloins. Like his tenderloins wasn't that thick. So even his muscle was deteriorating in an effort to save his life. So, you know, I shot him, and I was mad at him to begin with. I thought he'd just been a rut being stupid, you know. But, you know, after that, I figured out he'd been shot. I figured out where he'd been shot. You know, I felt bad for the old fella then. I mean, how many coyotes had he fought off down there at that river in the last week before I showed up? He literally went to that water to die. So that explains so much stuff at that point, why he acted the way he was, why he was hiding in the area he was. But on the flip side, if I'd just been out there walking around shooting coons that night and I was by myself and I walked up there without shining light, what would have happened to me, you know? So at least, I mean, he needed put out, and I ain't gonna say I was happy to put him out of his misery, but I'm just glad he ain't suffering no more, because he sure enough was suffering. But either way, I know it ain't probably the best story to tell, but that's how I got this old boy. I'm not a horn hunter. I've passed up plenty of bucks before. I don't care. You can't eat them horns. I don't care. I'd much rather have a doe. So that's why I got him mounted. He's probably the biggest one I'm ever going to kill. So either way, hopefully you enjoyed that story. If you like it, give it a like. If you have any ideas for other stories I should tell, or if you have some of your stories, leave them in the comments. You know, I really appreciate hearing other people's stories. That's kind of what the spirit of hunting's about, in a way, keeping the old times alive, keeping the stories alive, learning from them if you can. But either way, hopefully y'all enjoyed that. We'll see you on the next video. So if you can't be handling stuff like, you know, testicles and penis and stuff like that, you probably wouldn't be watching this. So forewarning, I'm going to be using the proper terms, but forewarning. So let's take another take on that. That's weird.